One of the biggest issues pertaining to modern day champions in League is how it feels like you can do everything right and they can do everything wrong and you still lose against them. The sentiment behind the 200 years meme was exactly that. Back in the 2010s, the power of a champion was graded more on the ways you could shut them down, not necessarily on how well you could play said champion. From 2020 to 2021, things really came to a head for League's new champions, with each one seemingly becoming more and more difficult to shut down on account of how much they were capable of doing and getting away with. Having supposedly learned from that, Riot took some steps to make champions a bit less egregious in design, and we actually managed to get quite a few colorful new additions to the roster that weren't excessively domineering to play against. I very much enjoyed Milio's inclusion, and while initially I was concerned about Hui, I think he came out alright. Yunara was also fantastic. But of course, even in between the good ones, were still some really frustrating ones like Cassante, Smolder, and Bessa, and our subject for today, Mel. Despite having not even been out for a year, Mel has garnered a reputation for being one of the most aggravating champions to go up against, no doubt accelerated by how dominant she was on release. Even after getting nerfed a bunch, she still consistently averages one of the highest ban rates in the game, unusual for a member of her class who typically almost never get banned, because ordinarily artillery mages never pose a big enough threat courtesy of their universal counterplay that, ironically, doesn't apply to Mel that much. Given how controversial of a release Mel has been, for today's episode of Everything Wrong With, we'll be talking about the Soul's Reflection, breaking down why she's so rage-inducing for people. Artillery mages have historically been the smallest archetype among the three mages, with battle and burst mages having nearly double the roster size. The cause behind that was due to the more rigid design constraints they were beholden to. Artillery champs are characterized by their long attack range and excellent neutral game. Their ability to apply pressure to champions at minimal to no exposure to themselves can make them a serious threat in the mid to late game, but it's counterbalanced by most of them having no semblance of peel against engage, and the inherent counterplay against their pressure being simply moving around to avoid skill shots. It wasn't until recently when Riot decided to try and bring more artillery champs into League. Hui came out in late 2023 and Mel at the beginning of this year. For the most part, Hui still more or less adheres to the advantages and drawbacks of his class. He's got good range and even a bit of zone control, but if you engage on him like with other artillery mages, he practically disintegrates. Not many people take issue with him despite having 9 abilities. By and large, he's an artillery mage with all the expectations of one. Mel, on the other hand, has been a thorn in the sides of many players for more than one reason. The situation surrounding Miss Medarda is identical to the 200 years champs that came before her, but different as well. Functionally speaking, Mel's a very simple champion. Her abilities are quite intuitive to understand, and they don't take up entire paragraphs of text the way Viego, Bel'Veth, Cassante, and whatnot do. When I first took a look at her, it wasn't that different to me from, say, Lux or Xerath. That was on paper. In practice, Mel's a paragon example of how it's not the ability itself that determines whether it's harmless or the bane of your existence. It's how the ability plays with the rest of the champion's kit, and also what options can be taken against that ability to mitigate them. I try not to read through champion's entire moveset verbatim since I know that's kind of boring, but given the circumstances we'll have to, because we can then connect the dots on what's so frustrating about her in contrast to other artillery mages. It begins with her passive, Searing Brilliance. Basic attacks and abilities can apply stacks onto a target that store magic damage on them, and if their health ever drops below the total amount that damage would do, the next stacks applied to them, whether a basic attack or ability, will detonate the stacks and dish out all that stored damage at once, effectively behaving as an execute. Right away, we can identify the red flag of this ability, but also the method of counterplays to mitigate how oppressive it can be. First and foremost, having a mark-based execute is obviously extremely risky. The challenge of landing a guaranteed kill is often what keeps it balanced, hence why Pike, Urgot, or other insta-kills are balanced around being a skill shot, having a long cast time, or being an ultimate ability with a long cooldown. Alternatively, attacks meant to be the finishing blow on a target like Darius or Garen's, while point and click are balanced out by them having to walk up to you to get in range. An artillery mage being able to passively execute low health enemies already raises an alarm. Granted, it is conditional due to having to stack it up, but Mel for all intents and purposes has a Pike ultimate active at all times, a Pike ultimate that can be triggered by any one of her abilities or even basic attacks. Unlike the passive on Collector, which doesn't really come into play half the time, towards the mid to late game, just a few hits can have Mel execute you at like 500 HP or more. It's an extremely deadly passive that, from a user experience point of view, kind of doesn't give you a clear indication. Most of the time you don't even know if you're in the danger zone or not, and more often than not, by the time you do realize it, you're probably dead. The obvious counterplay against her passive is to, of course, alongside keeping your HP nice and healthy, prevent her from applying stacks on you, which, if she, an artillery mage, follows the same property as every other artillery mage, shouldn't be all that difficult, right? Unfortunately, Riot sorta forgot that artillery mages are supposed to place the onus on the player to aim their skill shots. Radiant Volley is her main damaging tool and also her main way of applying stacks. Compared to other artillery poke tools like Xerath and Ziggs, Mel's Q comes in the form of many rapid hits in lieu of a singular explosion. Realistically, whether 10 hits or 1, it makes no difference, the damage is practically the same. The main reason they split it into 1,000 cuts is of course for the sake of her passive. The damage of her Q isn't really the issue, nor even the stacking component, it's how difficult it is to land. Or should I say not difficult. Even after getting nerfed in 15.4, Radiant Volley has been unaffectionately called the point-and-click ranged poke. Most long-range area blasts like Xerath W, Hui Q W, Swain W, Volibear E, and so on have long cast times to them and more importantly, a big visual indicator to give the enemy team a chance to get away from them, typically anywhere between 3/4 of a second cast time if not longer. The only way to realistically guarantee them is by CCing them beforehand. Mel's Q, however, has only the standard quarter-second cast time, and the missiles travel to the area very quickly. Even if you're constantly moving, she's guaranteed to land at least half the total shots on you because of how near instant the cast time is. Prior to 15.4, her Q was completely undodgeable unless you predicted that she was going to use it beforehand. By all accounts, it still is. Getting hit by a single cast of Mel Q not only made you and everyone else in the circle take a face full of damage, but it would automatically apply 10 stacks of her passive on you, and with her Q having only a 6-second cooldown at max rank due to being her main DPS tool, a second volley would follow shortly after, giving Mel an extremely easy way to apply stacks on you and damage you at the same time. Try to imagine if Xerath W was a quarter-second cast time instead of 3/4, it would be impossible to lane against him. That is kind of how it feels like to deal with Mel. Radiant Volley is what makes Searing Brilliance more oppressive than it actually is. If getting stacks on her target was difficult, no one would give Mel's passive a second thought, but because Radiant Volley makes it so easy, her passive can apply a lot more pressure. Were it just those two abilities though, she would still be tolerable. Mel's an artillery mage with an execute, big deal. You should still be able to employ the time-honored tradition of meeting force with greater force. Little do we know she won't even give you that option. When Mel first came out, backlash towards her kit was primarily aimed at her W, Rebuttal, offering unconditional invincibility against all non-turret damage and reflecting all projectiles back towards the person they came from. There are so many things wrong with her W, of which they got exacerbated because it's on her kit specifically. To begin with, fully negating even one source of damage or pressure from the opponent creates a disjointed matchup chart for any champion, not just Mel. Jax blocking enemy basic attacks with Counter-Strike is why so many top laners and ADCs hate fighting him, since any basic attack and the properties that come with it are rendered completely useless. Normally, Yasuo would be fine to deal with for an ADC who can ignore all the dashing around he's doing by way of point-and-click autos. However, Yasuo's W negates their entire pressure, all while he can apply pressure on you with impunity. Mel's Rebuttal may very well be the most powerful counter ability in the game, as it not only destroys all incoming projectiles in a 360-degree radius, but she can send it right back at the target. Oh, and by the way, it's a targeter reflector, meaning if you were to say throw an Ash arrow at her and then take a Thresh Lantern to reposition yourself, the arrow won't reflect back to where she was originally standing. It will lock onto Ash's new position and fire back. Either way, it would be one thing if Mel's W behaved like Samir's W and simply got rid of the projectile. Turning the enemy champion's own stuff against them creates an even more polarizing matchup interaction than any other counter ability in the game. For the likes of Windwall or Unbreakable, the worst thing that can happen is your projectile does nothing, resulting in a net neutral. You lost your Ash Arrow to the Windwall, that sucks, yes, but nothing else comes out of it. Against Mel, if you throw Ash Arrow into a Rebuttal, not only does she not get stunned, but Mel fires it right back at you to get you stunned, putting you in an even worse position than if you just didn't fire the arrow to begin with. A common argument in defense of these abilities is to bait out the W before throwing your big important shots, which in fairness is a reasonable form of counterplay against the counter ability. If it were someone like Yasuo or Braum or Samira, those guys have to fight you in melee. Obviously at close range they have to preempt your projectile since there's no way they can react to it in time. But lest we forget, Mel is an artillery mage. Most long-distance engage tools are projectiles. With her W having no cast time and are usually sitting half a screen's distance away from you, she has plenty of time to react to an Ash Arrow, Morgana Q, Ahri Charm, what have you. All the while, she can pelt you relentlessly with Qs to force you into throwing them out of a desperate attempt at self-preservation. Or putting it simply, she can and typically does win the game of chicken. Mel can afford to hold on to her W more than you can hold on to your projectile, because she's an artillery mage, the class of champions who excel at putting pressure on you in the neutral game. But okay, even with all that stuff, with her W having such a long cooldown and a very short duration to reflect maybe only one or two things, that would still be tolerable for most people. What really seals the deal with her W being stupid broken is that it's not just a wind wall, it's also a riposte. Mel negates all damage dealt to her, not just projectiles. She can protect herself from non-projectile or melee attacks, maybe not the debuffs or crowd control that might come with them, but when timed correctly, Mel can save herself from a Garen ult, or a Zed Deathmark, or a Viego Heartbreaker, or really just about anything. It is the ultimate defense in League of Legends. Every other defensive ability has some kind of condition behind it or doesn't stop everything. Rebuttal, on the other hand, quite literally stops everything, projectiles and non-projectiles, severely cutting down the amount of abilities and thereby champions that can actually stop her, especially when you account for her threat radius. In short, Mel's passive and Q are so oppressive because any attempts to stop her from spamming poke on you not only can get shut down right away, but they can even amplify her poke against you by making you take your own projectiles on top of hers. It gets even worse thanks to her E Solar Snare. Applicably speaking, Mel's E is her Q and Zyra root combined, a long-lasting projectile that roots all enemies in the center while applying damage in stacks. Again, by itself, not the worst thing out there, just recently it got nerfed to have a far shorter root duration. Did you guys know when she first came out, her E had a rank 1 root duration of 1.75 seconds and a rank 5 duration of 2.25? Yeah, I don't know how it made it past testing. Obviously, getting hit by her E guarantees getting hit by a full stack of her Q, which in the mid to late game is typically enough to kill a squishy target outright. To repeat once more, Mel's passive wouldn't be so much of an issue if the rest of her kit consisted of hard to land skill shots, but her Q is super easy to land even without help, and she even has a way to root multiple targets and blast them all at once. Prior to getting nerfed, Solar Snare was an infinitely better light binding since it could lock down more than just 2 targets and for longer. It's better than Shocking Word despite not being a stun due to being AoE, and it's certainly far more usable than Tectonic Disruption. Vel'Koz would kill to have this E over his. 6-2, assuring his ultimate sweet spot damage would be a wet dream for him. Finally, Golden Eclipse. As if I wasn't beating a dead horse already, once freaking more, her passive would not be that stupid if it was difficult to land. So what did they do? They gave her a way to remotely damage all enemies affected by her passive. It's practically a Karthus ultimate against marked enemies. You face tank an EQ but manage to get away just in time before she can auto-attack you to execute, but then out of nowhere you just explode anyway because she can press R and no matter where you are on the map, you still explode. Where's the counterplay here? If you don't have a Sonya's or an emergency heal button, you're basically dead, no two ways about it. Ultimately, that's the biggest problem concerning Mel's gameplay and why she feels so frustrating to fight. She has an extremely powerful win condition, an execute that can build up in strength if she tags you with a bunch of abilities, and they make it way too easy for her to do so by giving her a long-lasting AoE root, a near point-and-click long-range area blast, and a way to nuke enemies point-and-click at global range if they so much as have a single mark on them. To top it all off, if you even so much as try to throw something back at her, she either nullifies it completely or turns it against you. If even one of these abilities was not in her kit, people would hate her so much less. She could have her passive, Q, E, and ultimate but not her W, and that would make her easier to deal with. She could have her Q, W, E, and ultimate but not her passive, and she would be much more forgiving to fight. However, because she has this exact combination of abilities that it makes all of them more frustrating. An even bigger punch in the face is that Mel can actually miss her Q and E and waste her W on nothing and she can still kill you. Why? Because their abilities empower her auto attacks to also fire stacking bolts of damage on you. Yep, you could dodge her Q, W, and E and still die to her passive. She can auto attack you for a massive amount of damage and 9 stacks and then ult you and then you probably explode anyway. The vast, and I emphasize vast majority of champions have next to no way to jump through even one of the hoops Mel imposes on them, let alone all of them. Mel's entire kit fundamentally discourages interaction because for most of the cast, if they try to fight her, they will lose. She might not have a 55% win rate, but her design by nature shuts down so many champions even before they hit the rift. Altogether, Mel may not be overloaded in terms of the number of things in her kit, but for what is in her kit, she's overloaded in terms of the specific boxes she checks off. It is a perfect combination of factors that, were any of them even slightly different, she wouldn't be as suppressive as she is now. Hard to believe in a mobile poke mage is more problematic than her hyper-mobile percent max out free armor penetration lifesteal 1000 HP shield mom is. I'm being serious, I think people hate Mel more than Ambessa despite Ambessa giving off 200 years vibes more than her daughter. I guess the turns have officially tabled. What do you guys think about Mel? Do you agree or disagree with my points on her? Let me know in the comments down below. That'll be all for today, so if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you'll have to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars and join my Discord server and check out my other Everything Wrong With episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.